The temperature that night had dropped to 9 degrees. Claire Hartwell was walking home from a double shift at Cook County Hospital, her breath coming out in white clouds, her bones aching from 12 hours on her feet. She almost walked past the little girl sitting alone on the steps of St. Anthony's Church. Almost. But something, some invisible thread she could never explain, made her stop. What she did next set off a chain of events that would shatter her quiet life and pull her into a world she never knew existed. And the man at the center of that world, he never forgot a kindness, not ever. The winter of 2019 hit Chicago like a punishment. It was the kind of cold that got inside your coat, inside your skin, inside the marrow of your bones and just sat there, dull and merciless, reminding you that the city did not care about you. The lakefront wind made a sound like scissors cutting through fabric, and most people with any sense were indoors by 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Claire Hartwell was not most people. At 31, Claire had the particular kind of exhaustion that belongs only to nurses, a tiredness that doesn't come from laziness, but from caring too much, for too many people, for too many hours in a row. She wore her dark auburn hair pulled back under a grey wool hat and walked with the slightly hunched posture of someone bracing against both the cold and the weight of what she had seen that day. A man with no insurance turned away from a specialist, an elderly woman readmitted for the 3rd time this month because she couldn't afford her medication, a child who had come in malnourished and left with a social services referral and nothing else. She was 2 blocks from the CTA station on Michigan Avenue when she saw her, a little girl, maybe 7, maybe 8, sitting on the stone steps of St. Anthony's Catholic Church, with her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped around them so tight it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. She wore a school uniform, a plaid skirt and a white blouse, with only a thin cardigan over it. No coat, no gloves, no hat. Her dark hair was loose and whipping around her face in the wind, and her lips, Claire could see even from the sidewalk, were the particular bluish purple of someone whose core temperature had already begun to drop. Claire stopped. Any sane person, any safe person, would have pulled out their phone and called 911, would have stood at a safe distance and waited for someone official to handle this. It was the sensible thing, the cautious thing. Claire Hartwell walked up the steps. "Hey, sweetheart." She crouched down to the girl's level, pulling her hands out of her pockets. "Hey, can you hear me? My name is Claire. What's your name?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were remarkable, dark brown with almost amber flecks, wide and frightened, but also holding something else. Pride, maybe, or the particular self-containment of a child who has learned very early not to show weakness. "Sophia," she said. Her voice was tiny and shaking. "Sophia, that's a beautiful name." Claire was already shrugging out of her coat, a heavy-duty winter coat she'd saved up 3 paychecks for, a dark navy blue Patagonia she'd bought because Chicago winters required nothing less. She wrapped it around the girl without hesitation. It swamped her, falling past her knees, the arms hanging down past her hands. "There. Better?" Sophia looked at the coat, then at Claire. Something in the child's expression shifted. Not the relief Claire expected, but a kind of careful, measuring assessment, like she was deciding something. "You'll be cold now," Sophia said. "I've got good circulation," Claire said. "Where are your parents, sweetheart? How long have you been out here?" "I was supposed to meet my driver." Sophia pulled the coat tighter around herself, and Claire felt the first wave of real warmth come back into the girl's cheeks. "Roberto was supposed to pick me up from piano lesson, but something must have happened." "Roberto?" Claire glanced around. The street was mostly empty, a couple walking briskly on the far side, a delivery driver double parking at the corner, nobody who looked like they were searching for a lost child. "Do you have a phone?" Sophia shook her head, then hesitated. My father doesn't let me carry one yet. He says I'm too young. A pause. He's probably very worried. Okay. Can you tell me your last name, or your address, or your father's number? Another pause. Longer this time. Sophia looked at Claire with those extraordinary eyes, and Claire had the distinct impression that this child was running some kind of internal risk assessment protocol. Then quietly, my last name is Reyes. Claire nodded, not recognizing the name. She pulled out her own phone. Okay, Sophia Reyes, let's get you somewhere warm while we figure out how to reach your father. She took the girl to the 24-hour diner on the corner of Michigan and Wacker, Rosie's, the kind of place with vinyl booths and bottomless coffee, and a waitress who had seen everything twice over. Claire ordered hot chocolate for Sophia and coffee for herself, and wrapped both her hands around her mug, because she was, in fact, extremely cold without her coat. Sophia drank the hot chocolate with the focused seriousness of a child who had been raised with good manners and would not abandon them even in a crisis. She sat up straight. She didn't slurp. They had been there about 20 minutes when the diner's glass door swung open and a man came in who immediately changed the temperature of the room. He wasn't the largest man Claire had ever seen. He was maybe 6'2", broad across the shoulders, wearing a black wool overcoat that probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent. But it wasn't his size that shifted something in the air. It was the way he moved, that particular controlled economy of motion that belongs to people who have never had to wonder whether they were the most dangerous person in any given room. He scanned the diner in one sweep, and his eyes landed on Sophia, with an intensity that made Claire involuntarily straighten in her seat. "Papa," Sophia said, and her composure finally cracked. Just at the edges, her voice going soft with relief, the man, Dominic Reyes, crossed the diner in about 4 strides. He crouched down beside the booth, cupped Sophia's face in both hands, and examined her with a thoroughness and tenderness that was completely at odds with everything else about him. He spoke to her quietly in Spanish, too fast for Claire to follow, and Sophia answered him, and then he pulled his daughter into a hug that lasted a long time. When he finally straightened up and looked at Claire, his expression was unreadable. His gaze dropped to the coat around Sophia's shoulders, then back to Claire, in her scrubs and her hat, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, clearly not warm enough. "That's your coat," he said. Not a question. She was very cold, Claire said simply. Dominic Reyes looked at Claire Hartwell for a moment that lasted slightly longer than was comfortable. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat and produced a wallet. Leather, understated, thick. "Name your price," he said. Claire blinked. "I'm sorry?" "For the coat. For your time. Name a number." Something stiffened in Claire's spine. "I didn't help her for money," she said, keeping her voice even. "I helped her because she was a child sitting alone in 9-degree weather. I don't want anything." Another pause. Dominic put the wallet away slowly. "Your name," he said. "Claire Hartwell. Claire Hartwell." He said it like he was writing it somewhere inside his head. "I'm going to remember that." He lifted Sophia out of the booth, gathered her against his side, and placed Claire's coat gently on the table. "Get home safe, Miss Hartwell," he said. And then he was gone. Claire sat alone in the vinyl booth, her coat folded on the table beside her coffee mug, and told herself that was the end of it. She was wrong. Claire looked up Dominic Reyes the next morning. She wasn't sure why. Curiosity, she told herself. Or maybe it was the way he'd looked at her. Not with threat, not with charm, but with that careful, measuring stillness. What she found made her set down her coffee very slowly. Dominic Alejandro Reyes, 41, CEO of Reyes Capital, a private equity and real estate holding company headquartered in the Fulton Market District. On paper, a legitimate businessman, a philanthropist. He'd donated the wing of a children's hospital in Pilsen. He sat on the board of 3 non-profits. He had a profile in Chicago Business Monthly from 2017, a photograph of him in a grey suit at some charity gala, looking precisely as controlled and expensive as he had looked in Rosie's diner. But there were other articles, buried deeper. A 2015 piece in the Tribune that used the careful, lawyerly language of reporters who had editors and didn't want to get sued. Reyes' capital alleged ties to organized crime families in Chicago and Miami. A 2016 federal investigation that was closed without charges filed. References to his late father, Eduardo Reyes, who had run what law enforcement called the Reyes Syndicate out of Chicago's South Side for 3 decades before dying of a heart attack in 2013. Son inherits father's legitimate businesses, the implication went. Son may or may not have inherited the other kind as well. Claire closed her laptop. She worked her shift. She did not think about Dominic Reyes. She mostly succeeded at this for about a week. Then the flowers arrived at the hospital. Not a bouquet. An arrangement. The kind that required its own structural support, white peonies and garden roses, and something pale green and feathery that Claire couldn't name, in a vase that probably cost $200 by itself. The card said only, "Thank you for your kindness." Dr. Nora Whitfield, Claire's closest friend and fellow nurse, stood in the break room doorway, staring at the arrangement with her arms crossed and her eyes very wide. "Okay," Nora said. "Who did you save?" "A little girl who was cold," Claire said. "DR," Nora read from the card. "Initials only man. That's either a billionaire or a crime lord." "Possibly both," Claire said, and then immediately wished she hadn't. Nora looked at her sharply. "Claire Elizabeth Hartwell, what did you do?" "Nothing. I gave a kid my coat. It doesn't mean anything." But 3 days after the flowers, a package arrived at her apartment. This was more unsettling, because she hadn't told anyone where she lived, and the flowers had gone to the hospital. The package contained a coat, a replacement for the one she'd lent Sophia. She understood immediately. But it was not a replacement in kind. It was a women's winter coat by Max Mara, camel-colored, probably 4 years of her clothing budget, with a handwritten note tucked in the inside pocket in a firm, neat hand. "You left yours on the table. This is a debt, not a gift. I don't carry debts." Claire stood in her kitchen in her pajamas, holding this coat, and felt simultaneously touched and alarmed and furious. She was touched because the gesture was, underneath all its high-handedness, genuinely thoughtful. She was alarmed because Dominic Reyes had found her home address with apparently no difficulty at all, which told her something about either his resources or the thoroughness of his interest. And she was furious because she did not want to be the kind of woman whose small act of human decency got turned into a transaction, a debt clearing, a favor exchange in the economy of a man who apparently operated in a world where everything was a favor exchange. She put the coat in her closet. She did not return it. And then she tried again to not think about Dominic Reyes. 3 weeks passed. February came in grey and relentless, and Claire's life resumed its ordinary shape. Double shifts, dinners with Nora, Sunday calls with her mother in Milwaukee, weekend runs along the lakefront when the temperature rose above 20. She wore the Max Mara coat on those runs sometimes. It was warmer than anything she owned. She hated how much she liked it. The second meeting happened at a fundraising gala for pediatric cancer research at the Four Seasons, the kind of event that Claire attended exactly never, except that her hospital administration had, for the first time in institutional memory, decided to give each of their senior nursing staff a ticket as part of a valued employee initiative that most of the nurses suspected was related to union contract negotiations. Claire went because Nora dared her to. She wore a dark green dress she'd bought 3 years ago for her college roommate, Rachel Dunning's wedding, and still thought was the best thing she owned. She put on heels. She felt conspicuously out of place from the moment she walked into the ballroom. She was standing near the cocktail bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water and calculating how long she had to stay before it was socially acceptable to leave, when she heard, "You're wearing the coat." Then. She turned. Dominic Reyes stood 6 feet away in a dark charcoal suit, a glass of whiskey in one hand, looking at her with an expression that was almost, not quite, but almost, amused. "How did you—" she started. "I saw you come in," he said. "The coat was a guess." "The coat is warm," Claire said, lifting her chin slightly. "I decided keeping it was more practical than returning it. I left my contact information at the door with a note that I'd be mailing back the value in installments." This was true. She'd spent 45 minutes composing that note. "I got the note," he said. "I didn't want installments. I'm aware of what you wanted. I'm declining it." He studied her. "You're angry." "I'm not angry. She searched for the word. "I'm principled. About coat repayment. About the way you found my home address," she said, keeping her voice quiet and even. "That was invasive, Mr. Reyes. I helped your daughter. That doesn't give you the right to track down where I live." The almost amusement left his face. What replaced it was harder to read. Not hostility, but something more layered. Genuine consideration, maybe. "You're right," he said. "It was overreach. I apologize." Claire had not expected that. She had expected deflection or defensiveness or the particular charming non-apology of powerful men who were technically saying sorry while meaning nothing of the kind. The directness of it caught her off guard. "Okay," she said. "Sophia asks about you," he said. The words landed somewhere softer than Claire had prepared for. "She does? She's asked me twice what your name was. She wants to thank you herself." A pause. "She made you something?" "I've been carrying it around like an idiot for 2 weeks." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper, the kind of heavy construction paper used in elementary school art projects. Claire unfolded it. It was a drawing in crayon, a woman with red-orange hair, the approximate color of Claire's, she realized with a pang, wearing a large blue coat, standing next to a smaller figure with dark hair. Below it, in careful, large-lettered handwriting, "For the nice lady who was warm, from Sophia." Claire looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then she looked up at Dominic Reyes. "She drew this herself? She takes it very seriously, Art," he said. "Her teacher says she has real talent." Something shifted in his face when he talked about his daughter. Not soft, exactly, but less armored. Her mother was an artist. Was. Past tense. Claire didn't ask, but she tucked the drawing carefully into her purse. They talked for 2 hours. Claire would not be able to fully account for how this happened. She had intended to leave after 45 minutes, had planned to make polite excuses and retreat, but somehow Dominic steered them to a small table near the edge of the room and brought her a real drink and asked her about her work with a focused, genuine interest that was completely unlike the performative interest most men displayed when they were actually just waiting for their turn to talk. He asked about the challenges of nursing staffing ratios. He asked what it actually looked like on the ground when a hospital was understaffed. He listened to her answers. She asked him about Sophia, about her piano, her art teacher, the school she attended on the North Shore. He answered without the evasion she'd expected. He was raising Sophia mostly alone, she gathered, with the help of a housekeeper named Gloria and an elaborate network of security and staff that Sophia apparently found less impressive than her father did. "She told me the security detail is embarrassing," Dominic said dryly. "She's 7. 8, Claire corrected, and then caught herself. "I mean, she looked about 8. When I found her." 8 in January, he confirmed. He was watching her with that stillness again. "You remembered?" Claire did not answer that. She left at 11. He walked her to the taxi stand himself, which she thought would feel like a power move, and instead just felt like manners. "Claire," he said as she got into the cab. She looked back. "Will you have dinner with me?" The sensible answer, the safe answer, was no. "Yes," she said. The dinner happened on a Thursday at a small Italian restaurant in River North called Portofino's that seated about 30 people and had no online presence whatsoever. The owner, a compact 60-something man named Cesare, greeted Dominic with the warmth and deference of someone who had known him for decades. The table they were given was in the back, private, with a view of the kitchen. Claire had done more research in the days between the gala and the dinner. She had read everything she could find about Dominic Reyes, which was both more and less than she wanted to know. More. The federal investigation in 2016 had involved allegations of money laundering through 3 of his real estate subsidiaries, a sealed indictment that was quietly unsealed and then resealed, a witness who had recanted, a federal prosecutor named Daniel Stowe who had gone on record saying only that the investigation is ongoing, which meant nothing and everything. Less, there was almost nothing about his personal life. His wife, Camille Laurent Reyes, had died in 2015. No cause of death listed in any public record Claire could find, just the obituary, which mentioned she was 34, that she was survived by her husband and infant daughter, and that she had studied fine art at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. No mention of how she had died. Claire sat across from Dominic Reyes at Portofino's and thought about everything she'd read, and about the drawing in her purse from an 8-year-old girl who called her the nice lady who was warm, and decided she would ask him one direct question and see what he did with it. "What do you actually do?" she said, between the bread course and the pasta. He didn't flinch. "I manage a portfolio of real estate and private equity holdings that's your LinkedIn summary," she said. "I read it. What do I actually need to know about what you do, if I'm going to sit here?" The pause was shorter than she expected. "I inherited a family business," he said. "The legal parts of it are what I run now. The other parts—" He turned his wine glass once, slowly, on the table. "I've been pulling back from for years. It takes longer than people expect. Untangling something that's been built across decades." "Pulling back," she repeated. "I'm not asking you to believe me," he said. "I'm answering the question you actually asked." "Why tell me at all?" "Because you'd find out eventually." He said it simply. "You're not naive, and you're not someone who looks away from things that make her uncomfortable. I've known that since the diner." A pause, and because I'd rather lose this early than later. The honesty of it, the almost brutal pragmatism, was more convincing than any smooth reassurance would have been. "What happened to your wife?" Claire asked, because she'd decided she was asking everything. The change in his face was subtle and total. Not pain, exactly. More like the particular blankness of someone who has decided not to display pain because displaying it would cost too much. "She was killed," he said. 2015. It was connected to my family's business. A man who wanted leverage over my father, who was already dying by then, decided that the best leverage was—" He stopped. Sophia was 9 months old. The silence that followed was heavy and real. "I'm sorry," Claire said. "So am I." He picked up his wine glass. "Every day." They talked about other things after that. Easier things. Her childhood in Milwaukee, his in Pilsen, the particular culture shock of being a South Side kid who had watched his father build an empire and had spent his 20s trying to figure out what that made him. He'd gotten an MBA from Northwestern at 27. He'd tried at various points to go completely clean, to sever every tie to the syndicate his father had built and run a purely legitimate operation. "And?" she asked. "And it's more complicated than that," he said. "People who've worked for your family for 30 years. Loyalties that run both directions. Agreements you didn't make, but that you inherited with everything else." He shook his head slightly. "I'm not asking for absolution. I'm just telling you what's true." Claire drove home in a taxi with her forehead against the cold window and her mind making arguments she didn't particularly want to hear. She called Nora when she got home. "He was honest with me," she said, skipping hello. "That's worse," Nora said immediately. "Charming liars are easy to leave. Honest, complicated men are the whole problem. I'm not leaving anything. I've had dinner with him once. Claire, listen to me. I love you. I'm your person. But there is no version of this story where a nurse from Milwaukee ends up with a Chicago mob boss, and it goes well." He says he's pulling back. They always say they're pulling back. Claire pressed her forehead harder against the window. "He has a little girl who draws pictures for strangers," she said. Nora was quiet for a long moment. "I hate this for you," she said finally. "I hate it because I can already see where it's going." 4 months. That's how long it took for Claire's world and Dominic's world to begin bleeding into each other in ways she hadn't anticipated. They had settled into something unclassifiable, not casual, not official, but constant. He would call in the evenings when Sophia was in bed. She would sometimes meet them both on Saturday mornings, Sophia's small hand in hers at the Lincoln Park Zoo, Dominic walking beside them with his hands in his coat pockets and the particular watchful ease of a man who was always aware of every exit. Sophia had accepted Claire's presence with an 8-year-old's uncomplicated pragmatism. Claire was nice. Claire knew the names of all the animals. Claire brought good snacks. That was enough. Roberto Serrano, the driver who had failed to pick Sophia up on that freezing night in November, became a familiar face. He was not what Claire had expected. A round-faced man in his mid-40s with a rumpled quality and kind eyes, who was visibly mortified by the events of that night, and who, Sophia told Claire privately, had been absolutely in enormous trouble for it. Claire suspected this was an understatement. And then in March, Detective Ray Coulter came to see her at the hospital. He was a CPD detective assigned to the Organized Crime Division, a tall man with a close-cropped beard going grey at the edges, and the eyes of someone who had been in the job long enough to stop expecting good outcomes. He asked to speak with her privately, and they sat in a small conference room off the main hallway. "Miss Hartwell," he said, sliding a photograph across the table. "Do you know this man?" It was a surveillance photo of Dominic at what appeared to be a parking garage. He was speaking to 2 men Claire didn't recognize. "I know him," she said carefully. "How well?" "We've had dinner." She kept her voice neutral. "We have a mutual connection through his daughter." Detective Coulter looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Hartwell, I'm going to be straight with you. We have reason to believe that Dominic Reyes is involved in an active federal investigation. We're not here to threaten you or to turn you, but I'd ask you to think carefully about the people you associate with and what that might mean for you professionally, and in other respects. Is that a warning?" "It's a suggestion," he said. "Friendly." After he left, Claire sat in the conference room alone for a long time. She called Dominic that evening. "A detective came to see me today," she said. "Ray Coulter, Organized Crime." The pause on the other end of the line lasted exactly 4 seconds. She counted. "I know who he is," Dominic said. "He showed me a photograph of you." "Claire." His voice was different, lower, more careful. "Are you somewhere private?" "My apartment. I'm coming over." "You don't need—" "I'm coming over," he said again, and the quiet firmness of it was not a threat. It was something else, something that felt, despite everything, like protection. He was at her door within the hour. He sat at her kitchen table and told her more than he probably should have, more than she suspected he had told anyone outside his own organization. The federal investigation was into a money laundering operation he claimed to have inherited from the men who had run the financial side of his father's syndicate, men he was himself trying to document and expose in a deal with the U.S. Attorney's office. He was cooperating, quietly, in ways that put him in significant personal danger. "You're an informant," Claire said slowly. "I am helping them build a case," he said, against people who were my father's associates. People who have been stealing from legitimate businesses and using them as a front without my knowledge or consent, and who I now want prosecuted. He held her gaze. This is why Camila was killed. They thought she had documentation. She did. I have it now. Claire absorbed this. If anything happens to you, she started. Nothing will happen to me, he said. That's an insane thing to say. I know. A pause. But Sophia. He stopped. The armor came back. Nothing will happen to me, he said again. Claire looked at him across her kitchen table. This careful, dangerous, complicated man who had carried a crayon drawing in his jacket pocket for 2 weeks and who was apparently, in some double-edged way she still couldn't fully see, trying to do something right. Okay, she said finally, but you don't get to keep things from me anymore. If we're going to be... She gestured vaguely. Whatever this is, no more deciding what I need to know. That's a dangerous thing to agree to, he said. Then you can leave, she said simply. He stayed. The call came on a Thursday night in late April. Claire was at home. Dominic was supposed to be at a meeting in the Loop. She'd gotten used to not asking what kind. Her phone rang at 11:15, and the number was Roberto's. Miss Hartwell. Roberto's voice was tightly controlled in the way of someone suppressing something urgent. There's been an incident. Mr. Reyes asked me to call you. He's fine. But there's been an incident. Where is he? Northwestern Memorial, room 412. She was in a cab within 3 minutes. He had been shot, once in the left shoulder, a clean through and through that had missed anything vital by what the attending surgeon, a colleague of Claire's named Dr. Anton Welch, described as an unreasonable amount of luck. He was sitting up in the hospital bed when she arrived, pale and paper-gowned, with his shoulder heavily bandaged and his right hand lying in his lap, and the careful blankness on his face that she'd learned to read as him working very hard not to show pain. Sophia was not there. Sophia had been taken to a safe house, a word that Claire had to consciously not react to, by 2 of Dominic's most trusted people. Claire stood in the doorway of room 412 for a moment, then walked in, pulled a chair to the side of the bed, sat down, and took his right hand in both of hers. Don't, he said. Don't what? Whatever you're about to say. I was going to say your color's bad, and you need fluids, she said. I'm a nurse. This is professional. Something shifted in his expression. He closed his hand around hers. There were 3 of them, he said. Outside the parking garage on Monroe, 2 men I recognized from my father's organization, from the group I've been cooperating against. Someone told them. Someone in the US. Attorney's office? Or someone close to me. He said it evenly, but she felt the weight of it. There are very few people who know the details of what I've been doing. Roberto? No. Absolute certainty. Roberto has been with me since I was 23. He was the one who pulled me out of the situation. She stayed at the hospital until 4 in the morning. She held his hand for most of it, which she told herself was professional. She was a nurse. People needed to be held on to when they were hurt. That was simply physiological fact. At 2:30, when he was half asleep from pain medication, he said, without opening his eyes, I didn't think anyone would come. You called me, she said. Roberto called you. Because you asked him to, she said. You called me. He didn't answer, but his hand tightened on hers. The federal investigation moved to an accelerated timeline after the shooting. A U.S. attorney named Pamela Greer took over direct management of the case and apparently decided that the situation had become too volatile for continued slow-roll strategy. In the 2 weeks following, there were 6 arrests within the remnants of the Reyes syndicate, men who had been operating under the cover of Reyes Capital's holding company subsidiaries, laundering money through real estate transactions and construction contracts. The Chicago Tribune ran it on the front page. The piece referred to Dominic as a prominent Chicago businessman and a cooperating witness. It was the most accurate thing the Tribune had ever printed about him, Claire thought. Detective Ray Coulter called Claire 2 days after the arrests. "Miss Hartwell," he said, "I owe you an apology for implying what I implied in that meeting. You implied I should stay away from a man you were using to build your case," she said, "which I suppose was complicated." "Something like that," he said. "For what it's worth, what he did took a particular kind of courage. Took him about 5 years to get to a place where he trusted us enough to do it, and the people he helped us take down were responsible for things that I'm not going to describe to you over the phone." A pause. "Anyway, I thought you should hear it." After she hung up, Claire sat at her kitchen table and thought about a little girl in a thin cardigan on the steps of a church in 9-degree weather. She thought about the invisible thread that had made her stop. She thought about what it means to be warm, really warm, not just in body, but in a way that reaches other people, that costs you something, that changes things. She thought about what a coincidence it was, except it wasn't, quite, was it? She called Dominic. "Tell me something," she said. "Sophia, that night at St. Anthony's, Roberto was supposed to pick her up." "Yes." He didn't. "He was detained," Dominic said. "There was a situation that required his attention. He was 20 minutes late. I've never forgiven him." "Has he ever been late before?" A pause. "No." "Has he been late since?" "No." "Dominic," she said, "the night I found your daughter. Was that entirely an accident?" The silence on the line was very long. "Sophia was never in real danger," he said finally. "She was 20 feet from the church door. Father Dennis knows her. She would have gone inside the moment she was truly uncomfortable. I would never—" "But someone was watching," Claire said. "Someone from your team was watching." Another pause. "There was a man across the street, and you were told about me. I was given a description, and then you had me investigated. A basic background check. Before you came to the diner." "Yes?" Claire took a breath. "So you knew, when you walked into Rosie's diner, that I was a nurse at Cook County Hospital with no criminal record and no ties to any of your people. You knew I was safe." "Yes." "Why?" she asked. The word came out quieter than she intended. The longest pause yet. "Because Sophia had been asking about getting a dog," Dominic said, and Claire laughed, a short, involuntary sound. Because of all the things she'd expected him to say. Not because of that. Because— He stopped. Started again. "I haven't trusted many people in my life. I don't have— There's very few people I can trust with Sophia. Not romantically. Not that. Just someone outside. Someone normal. Someone who would—" He trailed off. "Someone warm," Claire said softly. "Yes," he said, and then it turned into something else. "Yes." A pause. "I didn't expect that. That wasn't the intention." "I know," she said. She believed him, mostly because the thing she'd learned over these months was that Dominic Reyes was many things. Guarded, careful, carrying more weight than anyone should. But he was not the kind of man who manufactured emotion. When he felt something, it cost him. When he showed it, it cost him more. "I'm not angry," she said. "I need you to know that I'm not angry. But I need you to also know that you don't get to manage me. Not ever again." "I know that," he said. "Do you?" "I know it now," he said. And then, quieter, "I'm sorry, Claire." The summer that followed was the strangest and most luminous of Claire Hartwell's life. She was 32. She had spent most of her adult life being practical, careful, good. She had chosen nursing because she wanted to matter to people. She had dated men who were safe and straightforward and left her politely, eventually because she was too busy or too independent or too something they couldn't quite name. She had lived in a series of small, clean apartments and eaten dinner standing at her kitchen counter and told herself this was fine. This was enough. It was not, she realized, enough. Sophia's school let out in June, and she spent the summer between her father's houses in Chicago and a lake house in Door County, Wisconsin, that had been in the Reyes family for 40 years. Claire visited twice, the second time for a full week, at Sophia's specific and pressing request. She slept in a guest room with a view of the water and woke up to Sophia appearing at her door at 7 a.m., with the focused intention of someone who had a full schedule of activities planned and was not going to be delayed. They painted watercolors on the dock. Sophia was, as her teacher had said, genuinely talented. She had Camille's eye, Dominic said, watching them from the porch steps with his coffee, and Claire could hear in the way he said it that it was both a grief and a gift. One evening, when Sophia was in bed and they were sitting on the dock with the last of the sunset turning the lake orange, Dominic told Claire about Camille. Really told her, not the careful, edited version from the restaurant. He told her how they'd met at a gallery opening when he was 29 and Camille was 26, how she'd been the first person who'd made him feel like himself outside of the world he'd grown up in, how she'd known what his family was, and had loved him anyway with the particular kind of clear-eyed love that doesn't require the other person to be something different, how she had been killed by men who wanted to send his father a message, who had taken her from a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon in February, who had underestimated what Eduardo Reyes's son would do when he finally had enough. "When did you decide to cooperate with the government?" Claire asked. "The day after her funeral," he said. "I wasn't ready yet. I was too angry, and angry people make mistakes. But I decided," he looked at the water, "it took 5 years to have enough to give them. To know which people could be trusted. To do it without getting Sophia." He stopped, without creating more of what had already happened. "You protected her," Claire said. "I tried." He was quiet for a moment. "It's not nothing, what you did that night. I know I engineered it. I know that's not—" He shook his head. "But you still stopped. You didn't have to stop. A lot of people wouldn't have. And I had a man across the street and a church door 20 feet away. But you stopped." He looked at her. "That matters." "It matters to me, too," she said. "That night." She thought of the invisible thread. "Something made me stop." "What?" She thought about it for a real moment. "She looked cold," she said finally. "And cold people need someone to stop." He turned toward her on the dock, and the lake light caught his face, and Claire thought, "This is not the life I planned. This is not the careful, practical life I constructed for myself. This is something else entirely. Larger and stranger and more frightening and more real." He kissed her for the first time on that dock, with the water dark beneath them and the Wisconsin sky enormous overhead, and Sophia asleep in the lake house behind them, and the summer insects making their enormous noise, and Claire thought, "There it is. There is the thing I've been living around the edges of for 8 months. The arrests from the federal case played out through the fall. 3 men were convicted at trial. 2 others pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentences. The U.S. Attorney's Office issued a statement praising the cooperation of an unnamed individual whose assistance had been essential to the prosecution. The Tribune ran a follow-up piece, and this time Dominic's name appeared in it only as a CEO responding to questions about the impact on his legitimate businesses, which were, by all accounts, entirely clean. Detective Ray Coulter retired from the CPD in October. He sent Dominic a bottle of very good whiskey. Dominic sent him back one that was better because he was constitutionally incapable of not having the last word in a gesture, and Claire teased him about this for 3 days. Nora Whitfield, who had been saying, "I told you so," for approximately 9 months by this point, met Dominic for the first time at Claire's birthday dinner in November and spent the first 20 minutes of the evening visibly taking his measure. Then she said very directly, "If you hurt her, I will be creative about it." Dominic met her eyes without blinking. "Understood," he said. Nora looked at Claire afterward and shrugged one shoulder. "Okay," she said. "He'll do." Sophia, for her part, had opinions. She expressed them one Sunday in October, while she and Claire were making cookies in the kitchen of the Lakeview house. A domestically elaborate project that had been entirely Sophia's idea, and that involved an amount of flour that Claire was fairly certain was structural. And she said, without looking up from the dough, "Are you going to stay?" Claire's hand stilled on the rolling pin. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I mean, are you going to stay?" Sophia looked up then, with those dark, amber-flecked eyes that were so much her father's, and also entirely her own. "A lot of people leave, because of my dad, because of what our family is, or was." She turned back to the dough. "I just want to know so I can plan." The practical 8-year-old calculus of it broke Claire's heart a little, in the kindest possible way. "I'm not a leaver," Claire said. "How do you know?" "Because I stopped on a cold night in November, when it would have been easier not to," she said. "I've been stopping ever since." She put her hand over Sophia's on the dough. "I'm not going anywhere." Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, with the gravity of someone filing away an important piece of information. "Okay," she said. "You can have the first cookie when they're done." "Thank you," Claire said. "That's very generous." "The biggest one," Sophia clarified, "because you were nice when I was cold." Claire laughed. "The full, real kind, the kind that starts in the chest." And the kitchen smelled like butter and sugar and the particular warmth of a life that had rebuilt itself around a single, simple act of human decency. Dominic appeared in the kitchen doorway at this point, having apparently heard the laugh from the hallway, and stood looking at the two of them at the flour-covered counter, with an expression that Claire would spend a long time afterward trying to properly describe. Relief, maybe. Or something bigger than relief. The look of a man who had spent years carrying grief and caution and the particular isolation of being someone no one could fully reach, and who had found himself, through the most unlikely of chains of events, a late driver, a freezing night, a woman who stopped, inside something he had not let himself believe was still available to him. Love, probably. Just that. 2 years later. The coat, the Max Mara camel coat that Claire had told herself she was keeping only because it was practical, was hanging on a hook by the front door of a house in Lincoln Square, which was neither Claire's apartment nor Dominic's Lakeview house, but something they had chosen together, which was the point. Sophia was 10 now, and in the fierce middle of a photography phase that had replaced the watercolor phase but had not, her art teacher was pleased to report, replaced the underlying talent. She had recently taken a series of portraits of Claire, close-up, technically better than most 10-year-olds had any right to produce, which were printed and hanging in the upstairs hallway. "It's a bit strange," Claire said, looking at them, "living in a hallway full of pictures of myself." "It's art," Sophia said, with the serenity of someone who has been told she has real talent and has decided to fully inhabit this identity. "You should be honored." "I am," Claire said. "Very honored." The investigation was closed. The men who had killed Camille were in federal prison. Dominic still carried things. He always would. Some weights don't lift. They only become more manageable. But he carried them differently now. He slept better. He laughed more. He was, in the private vocabulary that Claire had developed for things she didn't say out loud, learning to be inside his life again instead of managing it from a careful distance. Roberto, who had been forgiven, after a significant period of Claire's advocacy on his behalf, for the frozen November evening that had started everything, became a fixture of their household in the easy way of family retainers who have been around long enough to simply become part of the furniture. He drove Sophia to school with the scrupulous punctuality of a man who had learned his lesson thoroughly. One evening in December, Sophia in bed, the city quiet outside, Dominic put the Max Mara coat in Claire's hands and said, "I need you to know that I fell in love with you before I met you." She looked at him. "The report Roberto's man gave me," he said, "before I came to the diner. It said you'd stayed with the child for 40 minutes, that you'd paid for the hot chocolate out of your own pocket when you were clearly, from the details of your life, not someone who had money to spare, that you kept trying to keep her warm by rubbing her hands. He paused, and I thought. He stopped. What did you think? She asked softly. I thought, there is a kind person in the world, a genuinely kind person, not performing it, not transactionally kind, not strategically kind, just kind. Because a child was cold, he took a breath. I hadn't seen that in a very long time. I didn't know if I still believed it existed. Claire looked at the coat, at the man, at the house they had made together. It exists, she said. I know, he said. I married it. Outside, Chicago was cold. Inside, the lights were warm. On the steps of St. Anthony's Church, there is a small bronze plaque now, placed there anonymously, though if you knew who had it installed, you wouldn't be surprised. It reads, "In honor of the warmth shown to a child here." November 2019. Father Dennis knows the story. He has kept it, as he keeps most things, with discretion and care. And every winter, when the temperature drops to 9 degrees, and the lakefront wind comes in off the water like scissors, somewhere in the city, there is a woman who stops, who sees someone cold, who takes off her coat. It costs her something every time. It is always worth it. This is not just a love story. It's a reminder that the smallest moments of human warmth, giving a stranger your coat, stopping when it would be easier to walk past, choosing decency over caution, can rewrite everything. Claire didn't stop that November night because she expected a reward. She stopped because a child was cold, and she was the person who noticed. And because of that single instinctive act of grace, two people who had been living half-lives found their way to something whole. Dominic Reyes spent years believing his world had made him untouchable, unreachable. One woman with good circulation and a winter coat proved him wrong. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness still changes things. And if you want more stories about real love, real courage, and the moments that alter everything, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Because we are just getting started.
Oh, it's little goblins in the tip. Oh, that makes so much sense. Thank you. Thank you, Blue Skies. That's what it is. It's little goblins in the tip that make it dispensable via pen. How hard is it to get off any surface? Skies is killing me tonight. Skies is fucking on one. Hence the name, Magic Markers. Acrylic acid. Each kind has different chemical makeups. Whoa. Got my contract today for the show I'm on next month. They have me under 3 job titles? If only it was 3 monies. What the hell? Are you doing 3 times the work? Check. The chemical structure of acrylic acid, which is used to make acrylic polymer, seems quite neat. Look at us learning so much. I am Dustin. Thank you for the follow, Dustin. Welcome in. Woo! Oh, God! Just positively hurling my pens all over the place. A and A. Ah! Okay, I gotta fucking get cracking. Get cracking with this shit. The acrylic is there to make the polymer clear or transparent, at least according to some Wikipedia articles. That plus some pigment plus solvent makes acrylic paint, which can be dispensed via brush or marker. Well, no, thank you. Either it's a skeleton crew or there won't be too much to do. Okay. I'm assuming and hoping. Hoping. Oh my god, Boki, that sounds amazing. sounds like, think you can stop what we do? I doubt it. Or is it top what we do? We got the energy, I'll tell you all about it. I searched for my spark and I found it. Ads. We are about to go to ads. Sorry, everybody. Ugh. Stinky. Too small. We're about to go to ads. Not even close to that quality. Okay. I mean, that's fair because those kids fucking crushed it. TBH. Those kids knew what they were doing. And then they put it in Fortnite. Praise be to our daddy Bezos. Yes, sorry to everyone who's about to enter the capitalism pocket dimension. Though it shouldn't be two people. Maybe it's about 2 people. Because Dia has gifted subs to most of chat. Axe. Oh, my hip just cracked. Yucky. Shouldn't be 2. Maybe 3. Left foot red. There it is. Let us both start drawing. Hopefully I can get mine done by the end of stream. Let's go. Got this. Let us pray. What ads? I have the power of a sub. We absolutely love to see it. We absolutely sub to see it. Let us pray. I'm sure some of us dom to see it. I suppose you're right. Don't want to rule it out. Guilty. Who is this artist playing? Right now, this